What are the diagnoses that people jump to that are not an answer for why things hurt?
Well, if people think like, oh, something hurts, I'll wait it out for a little bit, assume it goes away. It's not going away. I got to go to my doctor and talk to them for 10 minutes and they'll call it something and give me something for it. And generally, there are almost always layers to why people fail to thrive or start feeling crappy. The act of trying to call something a name or a label ends up just generally causing people to stop going the layers deeper that they need to get to the problem. The label or the name becomes an entity to itself, not part of their behavioral pattern. And so, like, if it's a back pain, it's like, okay, well, this looks like you've sprained a ligament. We'll call it mechanical back pain. Or
So I come back from the doctor and I've got mechanical back pain. What am I telling myself now that keeps me from healing myself?
well, it starts to try to place blame on a structure.
Interesting.
There's also a tendency in the doctor's office to be like, okay, well, if it's lingering for a bit, let's look inside you. Let's look at these structures. And then if you start looking inside you, you're going to find things, particularly if you're older, like something's degenerated. And I'm like, okay, well, now my back hurts because this little facet joint or this little part of my vertebrae is degenerated. That leaves you in a position that you can't really do anything.
Right. It's like this structure is broken and that's a pervasive part of who you are. So, to try to change that is like trying to add a new arm.
Anybody that's a bit older and has an x-ray of their back, a lot of times it'll come back and say like degenerative disc disease. And like that's terrifying for a lot of people.
Yes, my discs are degenerating. My future is faded and terrible.
Most of the time, that result has nothing to do with why their back is sore. As a physio trying to help people, it becomes this diplomatic kind of, okay, I value and I trust this other health professional, but also you might be leading them down a wrong path or that's not necessarily helpful.
Here's a weird question. What is the diagnosis saying that's useful, but taken too seriously by the patient? So they, like you said, take away their responsibility and agency. Like there might be times where it's good to know some joint is out of whack, or is it not?
There are times where it is useful. There's something what you'd call Ehlers Danlos Syndrome, which is a term for people that are really genetically naturally loose jointed, which I'm one of those people. I've never been diagnosed with it, but I know I fit most of the categories with it. Makes you a lot more loosey-goosey and bendy, but it also does affect your vascular system too. It's a bit stretchier and bendier, which can affect your blood pressure, can make you bruise and bleed a lot easier. You can start getting more prone to headaches. You see people that are really naturally loose jointed. It's hard for them biomechanically to stay still, which also seems to lend itself to being more on the ADHD spectrum too. So your whole being just needs to kind of keep moving to deal with gravity and to deal with a bit of a busy brain. You can get little sprains and strains and stuff just rolling over in bed because you're loosely held together. And so people are like, well, like, what did I do now?
So having that understanding about how your body is set up might help you take actions that are protective because you can kind of think of that tendency in your body. And then you as the physio can say, given that you're a bit loose jointed, X and Y makes sense.
Having a person understand that, okay, this is who you are and this is something you have to accept that you're going to have to deal with ongoing. This is not a virus that you caught and is going to go away. This is something that you now need to take some ownership over. Another one with that is like fibromyalgia, which is a catch-all term for people that have a lot of chronic pain in their muscles and these tension points in sort of very predictable points in a lot of their major postural muscles around their body. They experience a lot of just discomfort and pain, a lot of fatigue. Tends to be people's bodies yelling at them. The best thing for it is to get them focusing on nutrition and fitness and lifestyle choices and improve. But the cycle cognitively that they do get in with it will be like, well, my fibro's acting up again.
Therefore, do nothing. Therefore, rest. Therefore, don't get in shape.
It becomes an entity to itself as opposed to being part of them, which can push away personal responsibility and acceptance of dealing with it.
That's really interesting. I think that's the part I know about. I hadn't just put it into words like that. That very act of labeling it creates an entity that you can then now disassociate from and not identify with. I thought it was interesting in both cases, both those diagnoses you were teaching me about, you went right to a common language description, which is kind of what I wanted to chat about it, the importance of common language. Like you said, fibromyalgia is like your muscles are screaming at you. Suddenly I have like such a clear idea of what to do with that, which is like, I probably need to listen to my muscles and let me ask my physio, how can I help myself when my muscles are screaming? Or the other one was people are loose jointed. And that is a common language description that I think makes it like clear you're supposed to do something. It makes me think of the question, what is going on with me right now? Because that's a question I ask my clients all the time. Hey, just check. What's happening for you right now? And those kind of questions get you interiocepting some of those same feelings, but from a more like a warmer place, less of a solving a puzzle kind of place.
If you've been told that you have something, but not how it was created in the first place, there's not really an understanding of how you can be part of making it change to it. So another example says people go in to their doctor with jaw pain and they walk out the door thinking they have TMJ. TMJ just means temporal mandibular joint. I tell people, I'm like, you know what? Everybody has TMJ. There's a tendency to take a common language and put some unnecessary terminology to it and put the word syndrome on it.
So the common language is jaw pain or a tight jaw or a painful jaw and a tight upper part, something like that.
Jaw pain is primarily muscle tension, which is usually a stress response of you clenching and guarding, which is around your chest, like your heart and lungs, and into the muscles in between your ribs, is people's emotional center, and where, if you're really stressed or anxious, you will hold something. If you're sitting at a desk or a computer all day, you're usually going to hold tension in those areas. That will actually all pull onto your neck and your jaw. And people have clenching responses. The most common places they do it are their butt, their neck, and their jaw. If your jaw hurts because you're actually quite stressed and you're working late and you're waking up clenching your jaw, now you think you have a disorder with your jaw too. Now you just made it worse.
That's interesting. And it's making me think of this thing called pervasive demand avoidance, which is a diagnosis. It's not a DSM diagnosis, so a psychiatrist won't make it. And it basically means, in common language, this person does not like to be asked to do things. Something that's a real problem in a person. Like, it is a real problem if a characteristic of PDA would be you're willing to take the dog out for a walk, but when your mom asks you, you now absolutely refuse. It's the presence of the demand which creates the unwillingness to do it. The problem is when you have it as a syndrome, parents become obsessed with saying everything exactly right to the child so that it won't trigger their PDA. It's like he's got this disease. My job is just not to make the disease worse by putting any sort of demand on him. And in my experience, it just gets worse and worse and worse because you're missing the common language question of like, hey, your kid hates being asked to do things. Why do you think that is? And it turns out usually those kids are very particular. For example, they might be very independent minded, like they're a really independent kid. So that kid needs to be put in the driver's seat of choices and treated with respect. What I'm trying to think about when helping with people with PDA is like, how do we talk about it? And then how do we talk about the actions you should take? And you're kind of helping me think about the role of personal responsibility in that. Because with PDA, that is exactly what happens is no one says to the kid the equivalent of you have loose joints, which is like, hey, you don't like to be asked to do anything. Often I'll just say to a kid, like, is that your life strategy? You're going to tell everyone to fuck off if they ask you to do something. And most of them say no. And the rare time they say yes, we have to pick a really particular strategy.
It comes down to trying to just avoid pathologizing things and then helping encouraging people to acknowledge the context and accept that maybe things are shitty and you need to do things differently.
But there is a role for identifying the source of the harm. And then I think it's key not to pathologize it and be like, you're a broken person, because that's not true of the person who is having the most difficulty. But I think that is a piece that gets missed is like, here's what you're doing. You're saying no to everyone who asks you to do anything. Or you're planning to do homework and then you're spending 4 hours not doing it and you're suffering greatly during it. Yes, do you have ADHD? Perhaps. But that common language description of your behavior is much more interactable for the kid than you have ADHD.
Let's be like, what's actually happening here? From a pain-wise person might come in and be like, okay, well, my back hurts. Okay, well, what are you having challenging with? What's hard? What can't you do that you want to be able to do? And then let's focus on that.
I see that a lot when kids are diagnosed with a mental health disorder. When they first get it, it's identifying for them. It's like, this is me. I have anxiety. And then over time, they start to see that anxiety as like a part of them that has to often be invited and dealt with. And they might think about it less like, I have anxiety, and more like, I'm going to get anxious here. Even that little move puts you in the driver's seat.
A diagnosis can be like, okay, I've got a bit of an explanation of what's going on here. So that can give me some comfort. And then there's the next phase of learning to kind of identifying with what that means to you, not it just being a label that somebody gave you.
Yeah. This is making me think of a George Carlin bit I want to show you. Did we talk about it already?
I don't remember.
I don't think so. Like all George Carlin, it's like,
Politically charged.
horrifically mean. Yeah. But funny as fuck.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat, most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap.
Notice the entirely functional description of the problem prior to him getting into the labeling question.
In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language, 2 syllables, shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago. Then a whole generation went by, and the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say, doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time, and the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion. Hey, we're up to 8 syllables now. And the humanity has been squeezed completely out of the phrase. It's totally sterile now. Operational exhaustion. Sounds like something that might happen to your car. Then, of course, came the war in Vietnam, which has only been over for about 16 or 17 years. And thanks to the lies and deceit surrounding that war, I guess it's no surprise that the very same condition was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And the pain is completely buried under jargon. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll bet you if we'd have still been calling it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans might have gotten the attention they needed at the time. I'll bet you that.
Kind of interesting.
He's spot on. He was great.
It's interesting that he inferred the lack of responsibility at the end, where he's like, that phrase allows us to not help the shell-shocked veterans. So that's getting at the same thing we were talking about earlier, where like there's a disempowerment to this language game.
What are some of the things that you see in sort of students or education in terms of labels that they get?
Well, the PDA one is the reason I wanted to talk about it, because I find it like a disrespectful phrase. But I think ADHD is a really interesting, different one, because ADHD, to me, it clearly does describe a bunch of subtypes of people, but it often does not tell them what to do about it. I think it doesn't talk about attention in a very fine-grained way. It's just like your attention is bad, or in the phrase attention deficit disorder. That's not my experience. My experience is that people with ADHD have a wide beam of attention, and to call it a deficit of attention is a very compliance first viewpoint.
A lot of them also can really lock into things if they're genuinely interested in it and can stay very laser focused, but it just has to be what they're really engaged in.
And the thing I love talking to kids about is like, well, we didn't have ADHD like back in the cave person days. So what were those people for? They didn't evolve for nothing. The rule of evolution is smarter than you. If something's evolved, there's a reason.
Well, it's a spectrum thing, but people that learn to harness it, it's a superpower. If you're able to maintain multiple trains of thought at the same time and see how they might intersect, you can accomplish a lot of things and see the problems and systemic issues. And that's why I think most CEOs of companies have some level of ADHD. Just going back to the loose jointed people, as I said, like there's very much a connection between a lot of the loose jointed people and ADHD people, which I work with a lot. And it's interesting trying to just kind of keep them collected and kind of staying in the same place. And part of that is they need to move more. And so if you're trying to teach someone in a classroom and have them make them stay still and they're both loose jointed and ADHD-ish, that builds anxiety in them and then they get more scattered and you can't kind of get them focused. I've been seeing a lot more adult women being diagnosed with it and being given Vyvanse too. And so I've had some interesting conversations with adults that have late in life been diagnosed with it and been given stimulants, asking lots of probing questions of their experience pre and post medication.
Do they all say post medication's better?
No. Some have. I had this one recently, just like a 70-year-old lady that I know her well, and it was very, very clear that she had some level of, for a variety of reasons, had some level of ADHD. And one day I eventually done like, have you ever been like diagnosed for ADHD? And she stopped and stared at me and said, you're the third person in the last 72 hours that said that to me. I encouraged her to go talk to her doctor about it. She came back having tried some medication and she was just blown away, just like, wow. So she got to experience a bit of a different state of consciousness and realized all sorts of things, and it was quite powerful for her. I've seen younger professionals that are more like 30, 40-year-old that have had mixed experiences, good and bad.
I always tell people to talk to their doctors, but when I'm asked frequently about it, I'm always taking into context, how much does this person need to comply? Are they going to a private school that requires their focused attention from 7:30 to 4? You probably need a stimulant if you have ADHD. But if you're in a drama program that's half your day, it might be built for your brain, and that stimulant might actually overfocus you. Which is why when I'm talking about what is the cave person ability, even somebody who doesn't hyperfocus, just someone whose attention is truly uncorrelated with the groups, that's insurance for the group. It doesn't work to have everybody have that, but you want someone scanning the jungle constantly. You want someone who can't think about what's happening right now because they're going to help you out 5% of the time, and that's going to be important.
Yeah, I suppose you want a few of the people to be the dialed in anxious ones to hear any little twig come that there's a lion there about to come eat us.
Right. And if you are that person and you're constantly vigilant because you protect from lions, I imagine you feel a lot less disordered than when somebody's like, you have an anxiety or ADHD disorder that makes you feel like this and it's a problem. Part of it is finding the use for that brain. I like to talk with kids about how wide is your attentional beam? Do you like to come in really narrow, or do you like to keep it nice and diffuse, or do you have trouble maintaining that? And that metaphor is just more actionable than you have ADHD. It's kind of like you get into the details of what does your ADHD mean? And suddenly you can talk about those details rather than the diagnosis.
If you have so many potential things that you're paying attention to, you can see it's paralyzing of not knowing where to start. And I see very extraordinarily linear people that are like, okay, I'll do A and then B and then C and then D.
My jargon is you have trouble with task initiation, which is, I think, common language enough that George Carlin would approve because it is the core of the problem. It's like you can't get started. And task initiation is something I can teach you strategies for. With task initiation, the question you're going to ask is, what are you feeling at the moment where you want to start a task? Are you having a conflicted feeling about not wanting to do the task? And this is where it gets fine grained, because some person is having trouble visualizing what the task is. Another person can visualize it, but the visualizing creates an aversive feeling that makes them want to move away from it. And another person could be predicting that they're going to do very poorly. Suddenly we find like the true cause, as much as there is a true cause. And then the remediation is like a very particular thing to that person's problem.
You see counselors that understand somatic work in terms of how people just hold different emotions in different parts of their body. If you're maybe having some challenge with your partner or with work, and like start talking about that issue and then start to just pause for a second, see where do you feel that emotion in your body.
Oh my God.
Um,
It's so powerful.
yeah, and you can start to connect the context to how and why you're feeling that way, can help you move past it or let it go. And like that's part of what's making you stuck. That's not a intuitive thing for most people.
Have you heard of internal family systems therapy?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's where you're thinking of yourself as made up of selves, essentially. It's crazy. You might realize that like the front of my throat feels like tense when I feel nervous about what I'm going to say. And then in IFS, they do this whole process of like listening to that part from a really deeply grounded place and respecting what it is asking you for, which is a whole thing that's not intuitive, especially if that part's been exiled, which is a big part of the theory. And then once you realize what that part is telling you or wants, what's weird is then it transforms. It's like, I no longer need to do that. I thought we were 5 years old still. And then that part relaxes and finds a new role. So I think that's an interesting analogy to how it could happen with like a structure as well, or a muscle or something.
A huge part of chronic and resistant pain is where they're holding tension and what that is related to. I had a woman a number of years ago that had a right shoulder pain for a long time, and it was all tense and she couldn't move it very well and it hurt. And I did some like IMS dry needling around it. I could loosen it up. It would feel better. It would move much better, but it always kept coming back in the same scenario. Like it just seemed like we were 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. I started asking her more questions about when this pain started. And it started right around the time that her parent had died. And it was in another province over in Alberta. And her whole family was in Alberta. She was here in Vancouver. And they decided to have a funeral for the parent fairly quickly. So this person had to jump in a car and drive through the Rocky Mountains in the winter while grieving her parent. And that's when her shoulder started hurting. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Like, we tend to hold deeper seated emotions in around our organs. And the biggest fascial pull on your right shoulder is your liver. And that tends to be where people tend to hold more anger. It will get this sort of pull in through there that from the inside that will tug on it. And that can be part of what tightens your muscles up around your shoulder. The root cause of that is the actual pull, which is a physical pull from your liver. That's caused by anger. I did a little bit of some visceral manual work on around her liver and just more of pointing that out to her and her seeing the timing of it. It was gone the next time I saw her.
Wow.
Yeah. She kind of acknowledged it, kind of let it go, and just whew, after months. And that doesn't always happen. It's the same with like what you're talking about, like get tension in your throat. You go into your doctor and try to figure out something, start more tests to try to figure out what's wrong with your throat. That can feed into your throat feeling worse.
You can create a negative feedback loop. That's really interesting. Maybe I'll just tell you about this weird idea in Buddhist meditation that's very popular on Twitter right now, for whatever that's worth. I think it's pronounced jhana, and it's one of these 8 meditative states that bring strong positive feeling immediately. And it's not trivial to do. You go to a retreat to learn it. I've never really experienced it. As I understand it, basically you're like meditating and you find some pleasant sensation, and then you try to put that in a feedback loop. I mean, you probably don't try to put it in there because meditation is not about trying or something like that. But basically, you're trying to meditate on it in such a way that the sensation feeds your ability to feed the sensation. Your perception of the sensation feeds the strength of the sensation of positivity. And it makes me think that obviously the opposite loop exists as well, where feeling the negativity creates the mental condition to create more negativity, which allows you to feel more negativity, which creates more. And it's interesting to think about those amplifying loops.
Yeah, it's what fires together, wires together. If you start paying more and more attention to the area that's uncomfortable, it sensitizes it. Little things make you feel it more and more. Just yesterday, I had a client that has gone through a pain clinic, kind of been poked and prodded all out the wazoo, and they eventually got to the point of doing like a ketamine infusion. They didn't really give her a heads up or the intention of this is altering your state of consciousness. And they can do just ketamine, or with a lot of pain focused stuff, they did like a ketamine and lidocaine infusion, which they'll make pain feel better, like painkiller. But the ketamine part is more trying to get at the emotional side of it. You can use it for treatment resistant depression.
And have an anchor state to go back to potentially. That's a different.
Have an anchor, yeah, and try to make sense of it. You can try to help break some of those things that are wired and then realize there is an existence that's different than my current one. Sometimes they just need a break, and you can have the experience of ego death kind of thing, where like that voice in your brain that tries to judge everything can just go away for a bit, and then you're left with still being alive and feeling things.
Yeah. And still existing as a human and like being a full self without that rigid kind of fake self.
Yeah. It's been a really interesting experience seeing people shortly before and shortly after doing those types of things, and just actually trying to walk through their experience of it and help them see that. It's not for everyone, but it is something like that, which you can get at with meditation and yoga type things.
Or even your physio or educator, just moving your attention to something. Because I think that's the gentle version of what you're talking about there. Now I'm putting this whole chat together. It's like a lot of de-pathologizing people is putting attention on their agency and what they're experiencing and what is changing. And when those three things happen, suddenly there's some positive feelings to go with, because you feel like, I know what's happening. I have some choices about it. That's why I always reflect back to a kid like, hey, you just did math reasoning. I don't know if you noticed that, but prior to this, you've never really been able to do that reasoning. It just happened. I just saw it. My professional opinion is you did it. And that moment is just an anchor state they can come back to later. You've been listening to Why Things Hurt and How We Learn with your hosts Brent Stevenson and Matt Giammarino. Why Things Hurt and How We Learn is brought to you by our sponsors Envision Physiotherapy, Work with Matt, whythingshurt.com, and Remix Your Education. Subscribe to the podcast at Apple Music, Spotify, or on your favorite podcast app. Why things hurt and it's how we learn.